In October 2014, after 18 months of planning, we took our long-awaited trip to Israel and Jordan. In June and July, it looked as if the political situation might keep us from making the trip, but with the encouragement of citizens and tourists in the country and a lot of prayer on our part, we decided to go ahead with the trip, barring any new unpleasantness. We felt completely safe the entire trip, and everyone went out of their way to make us feel welcomed and at ease. We planned and executed the trip ourselves with assistance from TripAdvisor contributors, Frommer's Travel Guide, and Booking.com. We landed near Tel Aviv at the Ben Gurion Airport. We taxied to Tel Aviv, where we spent 2 nights to better get over jet lag. We walked on the beach, ate good food, and enjoyed the sunsets from the terrace of our hotel. We took a walking tour of Old Joppa.
The name for a period of 2,000 years of this country is not Israel, it's not Judea, it became Palestine. Why did we get this name Palestine? Because the Romans who conquered this area, they decided to annihilate all the memory of the stubborn enemies they had. The Judeans were revolting 3 times, and they wanted to erase the history. Therefore, they called this country Provincia Palestina.
In Old Testament times, at this port, the cedars from Lebanon landed, headed for King Solomon's temple, and Jonah left from Joppa for his ill-fated trip to Nineveh. One of the most interesting things happening today in Joppa is the archaeological dig directed by the University of California at Los Angeles. They have uncovered a 3,500-year-old Canaanite wall. The excavation work stopped after the recent hostilities. We saw a house in Joppa that's supposed to be where Peter saw his famous vision, but that's a bit much to accept. I took this picture of our embassy and was briefly detained by the Israeli military while they checked me out. We hired a driver and headed north, up the coast. We visited Caesarea on our way to Haifa. The village here was as old as 556 years BC, but sometime after 30 BC, Herod built a large port city and named it Caesarea in honor of Octavian Augustus Caesar. This Roman hippodrome would have been able to seat 30,000 spectators to chariot racing events. It's a lovely place by the sea, and it wasn't crowded at all today. We arrive at Haifa and settle into our delightful hotel. There's a bomb shelter next to the dining room, which raised our eyebrows a bit. We're located across the street from the Lewis Promenade with a wonderful view of the city, and that view kept us coming back for more, day and night. We experienced Yom Kippur while we were in Haifa. and you really could have skated on the main streets. Haifa's most impressive sightseeing attraction is the splendid Baha'i Shrine and Gardens, a World Heritage Site since 2008. This is the Stella Maris Lighthouse with its magnificent view of the sea. We rode Haifa's little aerial cable car, which they will proudly tell you is the shortest cable ride in the world, down to the beach and back. We went in the Carmelite Church and Elijah's Cave. The church is a beautiful Italian marble structure, and there are colorful paintings on the dome depicting scenes from the Old Testament. Inside the church, below the altar, is a cave believed to have been visited by the prophet Elijah. Maybe he rested or even slept here. We were able to walk down into the small cave. From our vantage point on the Lewis Promenade, Haifa was especially beautiful at night. We took a day trip to the Mount Carmel National Park, where we had immense views of the valleys below, including Megiddo, where Armageddon will be fought. We saw various peaks, any one that might have been the one Elijah did battle with the prophets of Baal, and won. We traveled on by bus and visited a Druze village, where we had cappuccino and baklava.
This is baklava.
Before returning to the city, we stopped at the University of Haifa. We had lunch here and enjoyed great views of Haifa in the distance. There was also an impressive museum and art gallery that was really worth our time. We spent half a day at Echo. Little Echo has a storied history going back 3,500 years, mentioned in the chronicles of Pharaoh Thutmose III. The town is mentioned as part of David's kingdom, too. Arabs took over around 636 AD, and the Crusaders got control in 1104. We had a marvelous lunch before visiting the subterranean Crusader city, where we got a good look at how the Crusaders lived and worked in the late 1100s. When our visit was over, we found we couldn't get a taxi to take us back to the bus station for Haifa. We asked a young policeman for directions so we could walk there, but he insisted on taking us to the station in his car. What a very sweet act of kindness. We said goodbye to beautiful Haifa and headed into the Galilee, heading toward Tiberias, but we stopped at Nazareth on the way. The ancient part of town clings to the inside of a huge bowl, and the stone houses look like seats of an amphitheater. We were only interested in seeing the Church of the Annunciation, which according to tradition is the spot where Gabriel appeared to Mary, telling her she'd have a son, and call him Jesus. More than one church has been built over this grotto. The current church, completed in 1966, is lovely with a bold, modern design. I would have gotten so much more from the grotto if the church hadn't been there, but this was just the beginning of seeing a traditional holy site covered with a church. Outside the church, in the courtyard, are murals of Mary and Jesus, created by artists from all over the world. Each one is unique. We also visited Mary's well, where others believe the angel visited Mary. We traveled on toward Tiberias, with picturesque villages sprawled on the hillsides. Nazareth to Tiberias is a lovely drive. The mountains unfolded before us, and we were looking at the Sea of Galilee. We say goodbye to our Haifa driver and check into the Donna Gracia Hotel, which is also a museum in memory of a great lady. This beautiful hand-carved door was found in Istanbul. Our boat ride on the Sea of Galilee turned out to be more of a moving experience than I'd expected. On that small boat, I imagined Jesus on the body of water, fishing with his disciples, walking on water, calling Peter to come to him, and calming the storm. I felt very close to him just then. The weather was perfect and the scenery was outstanding. The remains of this fortress are from the 18th century. Tiberias lies on a major geographical fault line and was virtually destroyed by an earthquake in 1837. And because of that, there isn't much medieval or ancient of Tiberias we can see today. There are remains of a fortress and a mosque and part of the old city wall. Tiberias is a great base from which to visit a number of other sites, and we stayed here for 7 nights. At breakfast, all the large tour groups had their country's flags on their tables. When Phil jokingly brought to the dining room manager's attention we had no flag, he immediately brought us one with a big smile. Our driver for the Tiberias area was Remy David. Remy safely transported us around the Sea of Galilee and into the Golan Heights. At Ganosar, we visited a museum exhibiting a 2,000-year-old boat. The boat is 27 by 7.5 feet. It was discovered in 1986. We watched a movie about the excavation and preservation of this relic. It's great to have this real example of the type of boat used during Jesus' time. Traveling along the shoreline, we reached Tabgha, where Jesus multiplied the loaves and fishes. We visited this Benedictine church. When the church was built, the grounds were excavated, and the ruins of a 1,300-year-old Byzantine-era church was found, along with these beautiful mosaics. We see mosaics of several kinds of birds, and most famously, 2 fish and a bread basket. There's an Italian convent and a church on the famous Mount of the Beatitudes where Jesus preached the Sermon on the Mount. There are magnificent views from this high hill. Did followers sit on these very rocks and listen to Jesus? We were amused at the irony of the scripture inviting anyone who thirsts to come and drink, and the sign next to it admonishing us not to drink that water. We continued around this huge lake to Capernaum, where Jesus preached and began to gather his disciples. We visited this impressive 3rd or 4th century synagogue built on the site of an even earlier synagogue. These remains are especially impressive because the synagogue was built of imported marble and white limestone instead of the readily available black basalt rock. This isn't the synagogue where Jesus taught, but it may stand on the same site. We had enjoyed the food in Israel, but today we decided we had to have a Big Mac. We wanted to visit an Israeli collective farm community known as a kibbutz. The En Gev kibbutz is just about straight across the lake from Tiberias. It's a lovely place, sitting right on the Sea of Galilee and very welcoming to tourists. Phil recorded this little comrade catching his lunch. We took the little train ride and saw their many cattle, sheep, fish tanks, banana fields, and more. We had a drink at the restaurant at the edge of the lake, and then it was time to head back to the city. While we were in the Golan Heights, we saw constant reminders of the 1967 war. We visited the ancient site of the ruins of Gamla, a town destroyed in 67 AD by the Romans during the first Jewish revolt against Rome. Here we saw the remains of the synagogue on the side of the mountain ridge. Many Jews fled Jerusalem to Gamla and hoped to escape Roman control. Roman conquest of this town took place 6 years before the event at Masada. This is an abandoned Arab community. I don't know if this is a result of the Six-Day War or not. Phil and I decided to take a 45-minute hike to see the Gamla waterfall. The hike was long and hot. When we finally got to the waterfall, we could hardly see it because of the way the fall sits back into the cliff and the direction of the sun when we got there. Then we got to walk back over the same uninteresting, now hotter, trail. We did see these interesting dolmens, meaning table rock, which are ancient burial spots common in this part of the world. They consist of unworked stones, 2 vertical and 1 lying flat on top, with the body buried beneath. We didn't get much except exhaustion from the Gamla waterfall, but our next step was the Banyos Nature Reserve, and here we did walk to a lovely waterfall. Under the Romans, this area was named Caesarea Philippi. This is Nimrod Castle. It's so huge we saw it from the Banyos area. Nimrod Castle is one of the biggest and best preserved Crusader ruins in the area, and it has a spectacular view. Whoever controlled Nimrod would control the traffic from Lebanon to Tiberias and the Jordan Valley. We stop at the ancient Qasran Archaeological Park, where we visited a partially reconstructed synagogue. We stayed 8 days in the Tiberias area, and now it was time to move on. This morning, Remy took us south to the excavated ruins at Bet Shean, where layers and layers of Canaanite and Egyptian civilizations have been uncovered, including altars and other remains from the period of Ramses II and early Israelite ceramics from the time of King Saul. Speaking of King Saul, Bet Shean is where his body was hung on a wall by the Philistines. The most dramatic part of the area is the Roman Byzantine era city. The excavated remains are really nice if you like Roman ruins, and we do. There was enough to hold our interest longer, but the day was hot and getting hotter, and we were on our way to Jordan. Remy took us to the Jordan River crossing, where we said goodbye to this nice young man, and we began our foray into Jordan. We had a driver waiting for us at the parking lot on the Jordan side, and we were in contact with him by phone. Getting across the border was much more difficult than it needed to be. It took us almost 2 hours to get to our driver, Omran. We were very glad to see him. Omran was very anxious to give us more than we expected from him and Jordan, and he took us to several places not on our agenda, beginning with the ruins at Pella. We visited a cave where olives were pressed for their precious oil, perhaps used as early as biblical times. Next up on Omran's schedule for us were the remains of these houses and beautiful mosaic floors.
The bird.
Bill.
Yes.
Bill, yes.
Man. Our archaeological dig out of the way.
Yeah. زمان الكنيسة هي عندنا حاليا.
The first stop on our own agenda in Jordan was Jerash, 30 miles north of Amman. Jerash is considered one of the most important and best preserved Roman cities in the Near East. Rome conquered this area around 60 BC. An earthquake destroyed much of the city in 749 AD, and the ruins were left unnoticed until discovered in 1806. The beautiful archway at the entrance to the city was built in honor of Hadrian's visit around 130 AD. The arch is 36 feet high. This is the arena where many sporting events took place. Ideally, we wouldn't visit 2 sets of Roman ruins in the same day, but this is a schedule that worked for us. We thought Jerash was amazing. After our visit to the ruins, we have dinner at the Artemis restaurant. From our table on the terrace, we have a view of Hadrian's Arch in the distance. The meal was good and I enjoyed this lemon lime drink. Omran drives us south to Madaba. What a day we've had! We stayed at the very nice St. John's Hotel. But for the only time on this trip we did not enjoy our breakfast. With several kinds of hummus and pita bread, we started our day. We wanted to visit Madaba to see the ancient mosaics in the floor of the Church of St. George. The mosaics are maps of the Middle East dating from around 560 AD. The part of the map in this picture is of Jerusalem, with several well-known landmarks, including the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Dead Sea, and the Jordan River. It's considered the oldest surviving original map of the Holy Land. After Omran arrived to pick us up, we visited a church built to honor St. John the Baptist. We descend below the floor of the current church and walk through the original tunnels and caves. It's hard to grasp all the antiquity. We see a 3,000-year-old cistern. Back in the main church, I climbed to the top of the bell tower. Omran continues to drive us south. We stopped to visit a small museum. We took part in a Guinness World Book of Records project, the largest mosaic ever created. We wrote our names on tiles and pasted them on the growing mosaic. Inside the museum were large, well-displayed events from the Bible. We also saw stunning handwork. Certainly another almost unbelievable experience and authentic moment for us was standing on the top of Mount Nebo looking into Israel, the Promised Land. Standing where Moses might have stood, I could only think, wow. We had a delicious meal at the Dana restaurant. Continuing south, we drove on the beautiful scenic Kings Highway, stopping for pictures at the Midjup Dam, completed in 2004 and providing much needed water for Amman. We stopped for a visit to the huge Crusader castle at Karnak. This great day comes to a close as we have evening tea at a little place in the Dana region and had a drum and vocal serenade by this local guy. Before going on to Petra, we stopped for a view of the city. Our hotel is the Petra Moon, and we have a nice suite. The next morning, we take the short walk from our hotel to the entrance of Petra, established as the Natabian capital maybe as early as 300 years BC, but unknown to the Western world until 1812. We've looked forward to this for a very long time, and we are not disappointed. We walked through the narrow Sig with its 600-foot walls, almost alone for about 30 minutes, but then the tour group started catching up with us. We marveled at every carving, every cliff, every inscription, and took many, many pictures. Everyone wanted pictures of themselves in front of the treasury. We want to show others and maybe convince ourselves that we were really here. We've heard so much and seen so many pictures of the rose-colored treasury, and we had no idea there was so much more to Petra than that one beautiful rock-carved building. We walked as far as the museum and the restaurant, ate lunch, and then began the walk back. At the treasury, we absorbed one last view. We stayed in the park 7 hours. We could have stayed longer, but we felt we'd had our appetite abated and we were happy, not to mention we were beyond tired. Back at the Petra Moon, we took hot showers, had a good meal, and knew we had had a bucket list day. The next morning we continue our trip south, stopping to explore the picturesque area of Wadi Rum. Wadi in Arabic means valley, and Rum probably means high places. And indeed we did see huge rock outcroppings and valleys. We stopped for tea and snacks twice at different Bedouin camps. T.E. Lawrence of Arabia passed through this area several times during the Arab Revolt of 1917 and 1918, and his likeness is etched on this rock. These fellows had just arrived from Saudi Arabia and asked if we would have our picture taken with them. Of course we would. We arrived at the southern tip of Jordan at Aqaba. We stayed overnight in Aqaba, really because I wanted to have plenty of time in Wadi Rum and not be hurried as we crossed back into Israel. The Cedar was the most humble hotel of our trip, but we were treated like royalty, and Mahmoud declared Phil to be his American father. Brett and Lisa, meet your half-brother. We visited a couple of ancient excavated places down by the waterfront and took a glass-bottom boat ride. I smiled, just knowing I was in the Gulf of Aqaba, looking at Jordan, Egypt, and Israel. The next morning, crossing back into Israel was a breeze. They did select my suitcase to take every item out of and examine with plastic gloves. I had fruit in the suitcase, and I thought, there goes the apples, but they didn't care at all. By this time, we'd been traveling 20 days, and we really needed serious rest. We spent 2 delicious, glorious nights in Eilat. I visited the hotel pool, but my favorite time was sitting on our terrace, looking at the boat docks below the hotel. We visited the really nice underwater observatory, and we saw some interesting fish. We traveled to Jerusalem by bus. For $22 each, we had reserved seats. The bus was only about half full. We were given one comfort stop for the 4.5-hour trip. It was a real financial bargain. We had window seats and we enjoyed the beautiful, stark, multicolored landscape. drove by the Dead Sea and on into Jerusalem, which we knew would be the big enchilada of our trip, and we were not disappointed. We had 10 days in this city that has so much to offer. Our hotel, the Three Arches YMCA, is a landmark in Jerusalem. It was built in the late 1920s and designed by the same architect who planned the Empire State Building. The hotel gives tours of the building, and folks come from other places to pay to go to the top of the tower for the view. In part of the building, they run a daycare center for Jewish and Arab children. Their goal is to teach them to love before they learn to hate. There is a 600-seat auditorium as part of the complex, and we attended a chamber music concert there. Our hotel was in walking distance of the Old Joppa Gate. We took 3 walking tours of Old Jerusalem. Our city guide, Yanni, was very knowledgeable and fun to be with. We visited the 4 sections of the Old City and the recently excavated Cardo, the 2nd to 4th century AD Roman main street, located some 10 feet below the current level of the city. Yanni took us to the Mount of Olives, and we worked our way down. We saw one of the oldest Jewish cemeteries in the world. Yanni told us it costs as much as $50,000 to be buried here, and that planes landing at Tel Aviv always have at least one coffin destined to be buried here. The inscription on this tomb tells of a woman, the last member of her family. The others all died in concentration camps. During our trip, especially in Jerusalem, we saw quite a few places that claimed to be the traditional spot where one biblical event or another took place. But there aren't any ancient signs in Israel saying, "Welcome to King David's palace," or "Mary and Joseph stopped here." However, thanks to biblical accounts, extra-biblical historians such as Josephus, and modern-day technology, there are a few places that we can know are authentic. In the end, we know that the prophets and Jesus walked in Jordan and Israel, and whether or not to believe a particular event happened on the spot traditionally accepted is up to the individual. It was enough for us to know we were in the part of the world where biblical events took place. The instances when we were fairly certain we were in an authentic place gave us a special thrill. On these courtyard walls, we see tiles inscribed with the Lord's Prayer in 44 different languages. Continuing down the Mount of Olives, we see the beautiful gold onion-shaped domes of the Russian Orthodox Church, built in 1888 to honor Mary Magdalene. We stopped at the Garden of Gethsemane. We saw ancient olive trees, perhaps 1,000 years old, and perhaps descendants of the trees located here when Christ prayed all night before his arrest and trial. I wanted to sit among the olive trees for a while, but only people such as the Pope are allowed into the garden. The Church of All Nations, just outside the site of the remaining garden, was built in 1924 with funds from 16 different countries. For lunch, we enjoyed delicious salads and falafel, a traditional Middle Eastern food, best described as small, deep-fried balls of ground chickpeas and fava beans. We began our next day at the Via della Rosa, the Way of Sorrows. We enter the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where the so-called last 4 stations of the cross are located. Here we see the traditional places, as determined by Constantine's mother Helena, where Christ was crucified, his body prepared for burial, and placed in the tomb, and where he rose 3 days later. There are very many people here waiting in line for every station so they can lean down, kiss the stone, or pray, and some cry. Upstairs, overlooking the church interior, is the ornate altar built over the rock of Calvary, where it's believed the cross stood. Worshippers may touch or kiss the rock. Since the 4th century, pilgrims have believed this to be the site of the cross. We visit the site commemorating the preparation of his body for burial. Inside this structure are believed to be the remains of the site of the tomb. The place that thrilled me most was down the stairs, the empty tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, an authentic, over 2,000-year-old tomb with that actual inscription on it originally that looks like a tomb and is very near the traditional accepted place of the tomb. We visit the chapel of the Discovery of the Cross, where Queen Helena is credited with finding Jesus' cross, and nearby we visit Helena's chapel. Yanni took us to a small, quiet section of the Western Wall, aptly named the Little Western Wall. He explained that this is part of the original wall and just as holy to the Jews as the main section, but without the attention of the larger portion.
This place gives you the chance to see, to understand how the big Western Wall looked like before 1967.
The Western Wall is the only fragment of the Second Temple to survive Roman destruction in 68 AD. The wall was built by King Herod to support the western side of the Temple Mount. These ancient stones stand testimony to a glorious Jewish past, a proud heritage, and an extraordinary national rebirth. Visiting the wall helps understand and experience Jerusalem. I prayed for peace for Israel and that they would come to know Jesus as their Messiah. While I was soaking in this experience, a white dove flew over my head and perched on the wall. At the Moroccan gate, we stand in line waiting to be searched by security. We see a fragment of large stonework protruding out of the wall, all that remains of a great stairway set on arches. Long before the temple stood on this mountain, Abraham came here to sacrifice Isaac. The Jews believed Jacob slept here as he dreamed of a ladder to heaven. David bought this place, a flat rock being used as a threshing floor, some 3,000 years ago, and the original temple was built here by his son Solomon. Solomon's temple was destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BC. The second temple was rebuilt by the Jews 70 years later and destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. Here we are, visiting one of the most famous and beautiful buildings on the planet, on one of the most famous pieces of real estate in the world. This dome is gilded with 176 pounds of 24-karat gold. The dazzling exterior walls are covered with a facade of Persian tiles, originally installed by Suleiman the Magnificent in the mid-1500s. We enjoyed our time on the Temple Mount and the Dome of the Rock, taking pictures and just soaking in the views and the lovely structures. I had a hard time believing I was standing in this historic place. We leave Mount Moriah and walk on to Mount Zion, where we visit the traditional site of King David's tomb. Many believe the tomb would have been located in ancient Jerusalem, south of the present Old City. In the evening, we attend a splendid light and sound show. On our way to and from our archaeological dig experience, we drive past the wall barrier built to separate Israel from Palestine. This wall is very controversial and another sad reminder of the tensions in the land. We took part in an archaeological dig sponsored by the Archaeological Seminars Institute, with the dig located in the Bet Guvrin National Park, the ancestral home of King Herod. There are many man-made, unexcavated caves in the area, with inhabitants dating back over 2,000 years ago. Our archaeologist team leader was the very enthusiastic Missy. Our small group entered the cave. We were given buckets, spades, and shovels, and we were advised to dig carefully. The big find of our day went to the youngest member of our group, 6-year-old Eden. Missy was excited, but Eden was nonchalant.
Okay. Did you find more stuff? Okay. I'm sitting in a bucket up. I'm doing the same thing. Yes.
Look what she found.
I know.
It's not a little oil lamp, but it's
No.
what I find.
Yeah,
The bottom of a bowl.
it's a flared bowl.
flared
Probably
bowl.
she's thought maybe it served
Fish.
fish in it in a very elegant
Put the
way.
sauce down here in the recessed bottom. And there's the
That's just the stand, the bottom stand on it. Yeah.
After we dug up the dirt, we hauled it out, water brigade style, then sifted it to make certain nothing of value had been overlooked. Next, we were taken to another unexcavated cave where we crawled through the rooms and small tunnels, at one point dropping down about 5 feet to the floor below.
Hopefully we'll see you soon.
Yes, that's the plan.
Honey, I love you.
Yeah,
It's been fun.
yeah, it has.
Make it home. See you at the airport.
The tickets are ready.
Yeah.
The passports.
We'll have to find out.
It's not my first choice of things to do either.
Friends have said they can't believe we actually paid money to do this, but it was fun, and it helped us to better understand the archaeological process. Friday evening after dark, we walked from our hotel to meet with our host for the evening. We had arranged to visit a Jewish home to celebrate Shabbat, Saturday, the Sabbath, with them. Jonathan, our rabbi host, met us at the appointed spot and led us to his apartment where he and his wife Shauna and their 4-year-old son Yachariah lived. They sang songs, read scripture, prayed, and served us a delicious 5-course meal. We're so grateful to them for their hospitality, their frankness, and the insights into the observant Jewish life we gained that evening. We traveled into the West Bank with a small bus tour and journeyed into Bethlehem, where Jesus was born. We entered the huge church built to commemorate the event of Jesus' birth. There was a large group of people, all of us waiting for our turn to enter the cave. Another authentic experience was our visit to Elijah's Spring, where God, through the prophet Elijah, turned bad water into drinking water, and the water is still good today. We move on to the Mount of Temptation, and our guide asks Phil and another tourist to join him in reading the biblical account of Jesus' temptation. Standing in front of this mountain, hearing the account read in German, Hebrew, and English was a special event.
ויראו את כל ממלכות הארץ ברגע אחד. ויאמר אליו השטן.
Dabei wurde Jesus vom Teufel in Versuchung geführt. Die ganze Zeit über aß er nichts. Als aber 40 Tage vorüber waren, hatte er Hunger.
It is written that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word of God.
Our guide showed us a sycamore tree. On Sunday morning, we take the elevator up to the top of the bell tower at our hotel to see the view. From our hotel, we walk about 20 minutes to attend church. After lunch, we go shopping for our own little oil lamp. We visit the Israel Museum, where the main attraction for us is the exhibit of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Phil and I have always appreciated the sculpture work of Rodin. At the Israel Museum is this amazing model of Jerusalem during the Second Temple period. It was built with a 1:50 ratio. Our next stop was the Qumran National Park. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls has fascinated us for years, and we wanted to see the area where these treasures were first found by Bedouin shepherds in 1947. This ancient site was excavated in the 1950s. We saw the reconstructed ruins of rooms and baths. Accepted theory today is that this area was inhabited by an Essene monastic community and that the Dead Sea Scrolls are part of the Essenes library. Above the remains of the community, we saw the caves where some of the scrolls were first found. We end our day with a visit to the Dead Sea. I couldn't come to Israel without getting into the water and feeling for myself the effect of the heavy salt concentration. It was an odd experience. The water felt slick and heavy, and one can truly float effortlessly. In fact, after my swim, I found it hard to stand up. My legs were so buoyant. In 30 BC, King Herod built a magnificent palace and fortress atop this nearly inaccessible mountain plateau. Herod furnished his palace with luxuries, ritual baths, and storehouses of food and arms. In these pictures, the wall above the black line has been reconstructed. After Herod's death, a small band of Jewish zealots overtook the fortress. In 73 AD, according to the historian Josephus, the small Jewish garrison of 900 defied the Roman army of 10,000 until death and suicide ended the siege. Our guide showed us pictures of the lots marked with Hebrew names that might have been the very lots cast by the defenders in their final moments as they decided who would kill and who would be killed. We wanted to visit En Gedi, the oasis where David hid from King Saul. Which of these caves did David hide in? Did David enjoy the ibex and the hydrox as we did? Perhaps David enjoyed the water beneath a lovely waterfall. It was hard to leave this beautiful place. We rejoin the rest of our group and head back to the city. Our wonderful trip is coming to a close. Our last day in Israel began as we taxied back to the Mount of Olives for a view of the city with the sun to our backs. Just a short walk from the top are these tombs of the prophets. Tradition says Haggai, Malachi, and Zechariah were buried here. No one can say that for certain, but they are clearly burial tombs used many years ago. Our next stop is the City of David National Park, just outside the current Old City, believed to be the original Jerusalem, located around and below the Arab village of Silwan. As I understand it, the perimeter of David's original city grew to the west to become what we know now as Jerusalem. Eventually, the original city was difficult to protect and was abandoned. Because the Arab village has been built over the ruins, it's a very controversial site. Excavation has been going on here since the late 1800s. The ruins were discovered when building for a new visitor center was begun. In Jewish archaeological circles, there's a lot of excitement about this area. Perhaps they've located David's palace, and that would be the discovery of a lifetime. After visiting the city of David, we descend underneath the ruins almost 300 feet below the surface to walk through Hezekiah's aqueduct. The spring of Gihon was the only water source for ancient Jerusalem. The prevailing theory is that in the 8th century BC, King Hezekiah had the aqueduct dug from the spring beneath the city to hide the location of their water source from invaders. Whatever the reason for being dug, it was quite an amazing engineering feat for the time. The tunnel begins at the spring of Gihon and is 1,600 feet long, with cold and moving water almost 2 feet deep. The bottom was uneven, and at times I was holding onto the walls of both sides of the tunnel to feel my way forward. It was a long 45 minutes, but I'm glad I did it. Hezekiah's engineers placed teams at each end of the proposed tunnel, and they dug toward each other until they met in the middle. This inscription near the end of the tunnel commemorates the event. It was translated many years later. We visited the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial Museum and found it at the same time horrifying and peaceful. The Children's Memorial was especially moving. The names and ages of the 500,000 children who perished are read amidst blinking lights in total darkness. We couldn't stay long, it was just too sad, but it should not be missed.
Leonia Geichman, 1 year old, Ukraine. Danishevsky, 5 years old.
We stopped for pictures at the Knesset, where Israel's parliament meets. After we returned to our hotel, I took one more walk to the Joppa Gate for a quick last visit to the old city. Our trip to Israel was far more enlightening, exciting, and fulfilling than we'd hoped for. Looking back on our pictures and reading my journal, we're amazed at the fantastic trip we've had. We're thankful for our safety, the excellent weather, and the wonderful people we met who made the trip extraordinary. The next morning after our last sumptuous Israeli breakfast, we're driven back to the Ben Gurion Airport, where a month ago we began our visit to Israel and Jordan. Such wonderful memories. We've had an amazing trip.